Hello, welcome to our channel. Today we're diving deep into a topic that's often controversial yet critically important. When we talk about negative effects of thriving civilization, the overall topic can be found with resistance of those who think sleeping around is acceptable behavior. I'm not going to go into depths with cheating, but polygamy is a topic we're going to speak on today. Polygamy is the practice of having more than one spouse at a time. This issue has been debated across cultures for centuries. You may ask yourself, why is he touching on this topic particularly? Well, to answer that, it does have to do with a bond that all Christians know about. As when you have sexual intercourse with another person, you form a bond that's connected with them. And that one little bond can follow a person for years down the road. So as someone cheats on their spouse, they go out and have intercourse with someone else and then bring that back home. And there's a sense of jealousy that arises in the spouse's emotions. That's because of the spiritual bond and connection that you make with the other person. And for someone who thinks they're just going to have a one-night stand and there's no emotions and no strings attached, that is a misperception. Because that bond that forms, you continue to think about them the next day, you want to call them, or even if you don't want to call them, there's a thought process that goes with your line of thinking, and that's what makes your determination. And that's a bond that you form with that one-night stand. That bond can continue for the one day or one night, or it can continue years down the road. It depends on how strong of a bond that you formed with that person. So as a polygamist would have multiple wives, that arouses that same jealousy as you would in a spouse if someone wants to go out and then bring the connection back home with another person. So stick around as we explore why polygamy poses risk to society, neighborhoods, and families, as I share a real-life story where polygamy led to devastating consequences. And I'll give you 3 key tips on how to identify polygamous behavior in modern context. To understand why polygamy can be harmful, we must need to consider the basic structure of a healthy, thriving civilization. At its core, civilization relies on the stability of family units, where emotional and financial resources are distributed equitably. When polygamy enters the picture, this balance is disrupted. Resources become stretched thin, leading to competition rather than cooperation among spouses and children. This can result in neglect, as one partner, often the man, struggles to meet the needs of multiple spouses and an ever-growing number of children. Additionally, polygamy can lead to social stratification. In societies where polygamy is prevalent, we often see a concentration of wealth and power among a few. This can foster resentment, unrest, and even violence, as these men feel excluded from the social and family structures that are supposed to provide stability. The emotional toll on the individuals involved, such as jealousy, competition, and a sense of inadequacy, can have negative impacts that last for years. Now, here is a real-life story that illustrates the dangers of polygamy. This is the story of the Jeffries family from Utah. The Jeffries were a seemingly well-off family in a small, close-knit community. Mr. Jeffries had 3 wives. This situation seemed to work for a while, but as the family grew, cracks began to show. The first wife, who had once been the center of Mr. Jeffries' attention, began to feel increasingly isolated. With each new wife, she saw less of her husband and more of her duties and responsibilities increasing. The children felt this strain as well. As the siblings increased in number, resources were spread thin, educational opportunities were limited, and the younger children often went without basic necessities. The oldest son, who was feeling neglected and frustrated, he eventually left home and fell into a life of crime and substance abuse. The most tragic outcome was that Mr. Jeffries was unable to maintain the emotional and financial burden. He took his own life. His death left the family in shambles. The widowed woman had no means of support. The children were facing an uncertain future, and the community was left questioning the values it had once upheld. This story isn't unique. It's a pattern that has repeated itself in many societies that allow or even encourage polygamy. The consequences are real, and they are devastating. Now that we've seen the impact polygamy can have, let's talk about how to identify polygamists. It's not always obvious, especially in societies where polygamy is illegal or frowned upon. But here are 3 tips that might help identify a polygamist. Tip 1. Inconsistent stories or secrecy about relationships. Polygamists often keep their multiple marriages or relationships secret. If someone is evasive or inconsistent about their marital status, family life, or the details of their personal relationships, it could be a red flag. Tip 2. A pattern of financial irregularities. Supporting multiple families is financially challenging, and this can lead to unusual financial behavior. If someone is constantly struggling with finances, borrowing money, or has a lifestyle that doesn't match their income, there might be more going on than meets the eye. Tip 3. Social circles and community involvement. Polygamists often belong to communities where polygamy is accepted or encouraged. If someone is part of a social circle that seems unusually secretive or exclusive, where multiple families appear interconnected in complex ways, this could be another sign of polygamous behavior. Polygamy is more than just a personal choice. It's a practice that can have deadly consequences for families and entire societies. As we've seen, it can lead to emotional, financial, and social turmoil that destabilizes the very fabric of civilization. Let me lastly say, all you people out here living in your sin and harming your neighbor due to complacency and negligence, and later it comes to find out that you have an issue that arises because of your choices that you make, and you go and cry and plea out to, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? So what would Jesus do? Jesus Christ wouldn't make the decisions in the first place to end up in the place that you are now. How you can get out of that? You don't cry, what would Jesus do? You clean up your sinful acts. And from that point, that's when you can ask, what would Jesus do? Because Jesus Christ's Spirit, there's a holiness about Him. It's not running out here crying, I messed up, what would Jesus do? That's what would Jesus do from a good stance. Well, thanks for watching. And if you found this video informative, don't forget to share the video and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth discussions on controversial topics. Until next time, take care and stay informed.